Story 1. The Elevator That Skipped Time. It was a Friday evening, and the office floor was eerily quiet. Most of Samantha's coworkers had already left hours ago, but Samantha, the ever-dedicated marketing analyst, stayed back to finish one last presentation for Monday's board meeting. Her eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets all day. When she finally shut her laptop, it was a little past 6 p.m. She gathered her things, slung her bag over her shoulder, and walked through the empty corridor toward the elevators. The overhead lights flickered slightly, nothing unusual in this aging 30-story corporate tower. She pressed the down button and waited. Ding. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. No one else was inside. The air was cool and still. She pressed the button marked G for ground and leaned back, letting out a long breath. The descent began. 19, 18, 17, 16. And then, complete darkness. The lights cut out, elevator lights, panel lights, even the emergency strip above the doors. All of it vanished, as if someone had yanked the cord on reality itself. Samantha gasped, stumbling forward slightly, heart pounding. It couldn't have been more than a second, just a single blink, before the lights snapped back on. Ding! The doors slid open. Samantha stepped out slowly, expecting to see the familiar hustle of the lobby. The guard watching something on his phone, the receptionist chatting with the janitor, the noise of cars from outside. Instead, silence and dim yellow lighting, like an old abandoned movie set. The reception desk was empty. The overhead lights were on, but barely, dimmed and flickering in an unnatural rhythm. The clock above the entrance read 3:34 a.m. She blinked hard. No, that wasn't possible. She instinctively reached into her coat pocket and grabbed her phone. Dead. No battery. Though she was sure it had been at 60% just minutes earlier. Confused, unnerved, she walked to the glass doors. Locked. She peered outside. No cars, no people. A light fog hung over the street, glowing under the amber street lamps. It looked like a world paused in time. She knocked on the glass, called out, even tried her office badge on the scanner. Nothing. She was alone. The building was silent. She sat down on the cold marble floor near the entrance, her breath catching in her chest. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Then, ding! The elevator doors opened again behind her. Samantha turned, heart thudding. A man in a navy suit stepped out, holding a cup of coffee, earbuds in his ears, scrolling his phone casually. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Whoa, hey, are you okay?" he asked. "Did something happen?" She stared at him, wide-eyed. "What time is it?" He checked his smartwatch. 6:15 p.m.? Samantha's hands shook as she looked down at her phone again, now fully charged and glowing. 6:15 p.m. No missed calls. No change in battery percentage. No alerts about time zones or reboots. The reception desk was suddenly manned. The guard at the door waved at the man casually. The lights were bright and normal again. The fog outside had lifted. Samantha stumbled to her feet, unsure whether to cry or laugh. "I swear it was 3:34 a.m. a second ago." The man smiled politely, clearly uncomfortable. "Long day, huh?" She nodded slowly. But deep inside she knew it wasn't exhaustion, because she had felt it. The silence, the stillness, the time, stretching. And to this day, Samantha refuses to take that same elevator again. No one at her office ever believed her. Some blamed stress. Others called it a dream. But she knows what she experienced. Because for those few terrifying minutes, she was completely alone in a version of reality that didn't belong to her. Story 2. The Double Stranger at the Bookstore. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind that gently demanded you step out of time and into solitude. Ethan, an avid reader and part-time poet, ducked into a quiet second-hand bookstore tucked between two aging brick buildings. The bell above the door gave a nostalgic chime as he entered. The warm scent of aged paper, wood polish, and a hint of cinnamon tea greeted him like an old friend. Outside, the rain poured steadily. Inside, it felt like time was on pause. He wandered between shelves with no particular book in mind, fingers grazing over cracked spines and forgotten titles. Then it happened. As he turned a corner into the philosophy section, he bumped shoulders with someone. A woman in a green coat, mid-30s, curly hair tucked behind her ears. She smiled. "Sorry." He smiled back, brushing it off. "No worries." It was nothing. A mundane human interaction, but there was something about the moment, like a note played twice in a melody. 5 minutes later, in the poetry aisle, it happened again. The same woman in the same green coat turned the corner too fast and collided with him again. She recoiled, smiled, and said the exact same thing. "Sorry." Same tone, same smile, word for word. Ethan chuckled, raising an eyebrow. "Deja vu much?" She tilted her head, puzzled. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" That stopped him. Her voice carried no trace of recognition. No memory of their earlier encounter, if you could even call it earlier. He brushed it off with a laugh and stepped aside. But his mind kept replaying it. A few minutes later, after grabbing a copy of a worn-out T.S. Eliot collection, Ethan walked up to the front counter to pay. The old man behind the register moved slowly, adjusting his spectacles. As Ethan waited, the bell above the door chimed again. He glanced up. His heart skipped. The same woman walked in. Same coat. Same curly hair. Same gentle expression. But now, she looked around the store as if seeing it for the first time. She didn't notice him. She wandered toward the fiction section like a casual first-time visitor. Ethan stared in disbelief. There was no way. Was she playing a prank? Had she left and come back in? He approached cautiously. "Excuse me," he asked, voice tight with unease. "Sorry if this sounds weird. But have we already met today?" She blinked, thrown off. "I don't think so. I just came in." Her eyes were clear, honest. There was no deception there. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. 3 encounters. Same woman. Same coat. One felt familiar. One felt confused. And this one was brand new. Reality had twisted, quietly and without warning, inside the confines of a dusty little bookstore. As he watched her disappear between the aisles, Ethan couldn't help but feel as though he was the one out of sync. As though he had walked into a loop, or worse, slipped into a slightly altered layer of reality where time didn't behave the way it should. He left the store without buying anything. Outside, the rain had stopped. but the street was strangely empty, too quiet. That night, when he opened the book he had been holding earlier, the T.S. Eliot volume, he noticed something written on the inside of the back cover in pencil. "You've already met her. Twice. She's still catching up." Some places hide strange echoes of reality. Some moments aren't just déjà vu, they're fractures, showing us that the loop might already be in motion. Even before we notice, we're stuck inside it. Story 3. The Screaming Phone Line. It was the summer of 2007 when Marco boarded a long-distance overnight bus traveling from Lahore to Islamabad. The trip was 6 hours through winding highways, small towns, and long, silent stretches of nothingness. The kind of ride where people mostly slept, stared blankly out the window, or plugged in old MP3 players to shut out the world. Marco sat near the back, half asleep, watching the blue glow of roadside signs drift by. As the bus rocked gently through the night, he reached into the seat pocket in front of him, expecting a brochure or maybe someone's forgotten chocolate bar. But instead, he felt something hard. He pulled it out. It was a Nokia 3310, the indestructible kind from the early 2000s. But this one was different, worn, discolored. The rubber buttons were stiff, and the back panel was cracked. When he popped it open out of curiosity, it had no SIM card, no battery, just the hollow shell of what once was a phone. He chuckled to himself. "Retro," he muttered. Still, something about it felt strange. It had a heaviness, a wrongness, like it remembered too much. He slipped it into his backpack. That night, back in his small rented room, Marco couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the phone, not because he believed in ghosts, he didn't, but because it felt like it had followed him. It was irrational, he knew that. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., the room filled with a vibration. The phone, the one without a battery, was ringing. Not playing a ringtone, not buzzing faintly. Actually ringing. He sat up in bed, frozen. The glow of the keypad illuminated the room in a sickly green hue. The screen, which should have been blank forever, now displayed an incoming call. Unknown caller. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He reached for it with trembling fingers and pressed the green button. The voice that came through was not a voice. It was a scream. A woman. Desperate. Distant. A scream that sounded like she was plummeting down a shaft or into an abyss. The kind of scream that tore straight through your chest. He shouted into the phone. "Hello? Who is this?" Then the scream cut off instantly. And what replaced it was worse. Whispers. Hundreds of them. Male, female, young, old, all speaking at once. Layered over each other like a hive of voices. Chanting, humming, murmuring words he couldn't understand. Not English. Not Urdu. Not anything he could recognize. He pressed buttons. Tried to hang up. Nothing worked. Then the whispers stopped. Single tone beeped. And on the screen, a new message appeared. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Marco dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor and slid under his desk. He didn't sleep for the rest of the night. But in the morning, when the sun finally rose and he gathered the courage to retrieve it, the phone was gone. Not just turned off. Vanished. He tore the room apart. Nothing. For years, he told no one. He convinced himself it was a hallucination. a dream, maybe a side effect of lack of sleep, caffeine, and stress. Until one evening, in 2019, while listening to a podcast on unexplained urban legends, Marco's breath caught in his throat. The episode was about strange objects left behind on public transport, specifically old phones. The host shared a story submitted by a listener who had once found a Nokia phone on a long-distance bus. And in the middle of the night, it had turned on by itself and emitted the scream of a woman falling, followed by indecipherable whispers. And then, the exact same words. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Marco felt his entire body go cold. Because whatever he had experienced wasn't just a dream, and he wasn't alone. Sometimes, objects outlive the moments they were created in. Sometimes, they carry echoes. And sometimes, if you listen too closely, something on the other side might start listening back. Story 4. The dinner that didn't exist. It had been a stressful week. Between work deadlines, missed calls, and family drama, Rachel and her boyfriend Alex needed a break. Just a simple evening to breathe. So on a rainy Friday night, they wandered into the quieter side of the city, looking for something low-key. Somewhere they could just talk. That's when they saw it. A narrow alley, glowing faintly under the soft amber light of a neon sign that read, Trattoria Loose. It was small, cozy, tucked between two weathered brick buildings. The kind of place you'd walk past 100 times and never notice. A single flickering candle sat in the front window. Warm yellow light spilled onto the wet pavement. Soft jazz hummed from inside. A handwritten chalkboard read, Tonight's special, 4-cheese pizza and lemon basil soup. Rachel looked at Alex. Perfect. Inside, the space felt timeless. Rustic wood floors, iron candle holders, tables just far enough apart to feel private. A friendly older woman welcomed them in Italian accented English. Only one table left. You're lucky tonight. They shared that 4-cheese pizza, sipped wine, laughed about childhood stories. The waitress brought complimentary tiramisu on the house. For lovebirds, she had said. Rachel even snapped a photo of them afterward. The two of them standing under the neon glow of the sign. She posted it to her story with the caption, Best accidental date spot ever. Trattoria Loose. It was one of those rare nights that felt like it had been scripted by the universe. But a week later, when they decided to return, it was gone. Not just closed. Gone. The alley was still there, but it was different. Where Trattoria Loose once stood was now a brick wall, solid, clean, and sealed. No doorway, no sign, no scent of garlic or the hum of jazz. Rachel blinked, looked at Alex. This was it, right? They walked up and down the block. 3 times. Nothing. No restaurants even remotely similar. Just a convenience store, a laundromat, and an abandoned print shop. They went inside a nearby bookstore and asked the owner if there used to be an Italian place in the alley. He frowned. Trattoria. What? No, there's never been anything there. That alley's been sealed up for years. City did it after some fire hazard issues, I think. She pulled out her phone. The picture was still there, but glitched. The bottom half was black. The top showed her and Alex. But the sign above them was blurred, warped like static. As if someone had tried to erase just that part of reality. She tapped the screen. Nothing. Tried to reverse image search the logo. No results. Not on Google, not on Maps. Not even in cached restaurant listings. Not a single review. No trace. She went to her social media story archive. The one she'd posted that night was missing. Gone from the feed, the cloud, everything. They both sat down on a nearby bench, silent. It wasn't just the restaurant that vanished. It was the entire proof that it had ever existed. The memory remained. The laughter. The taste of the wine. The flickering candlelight. But nothing else. Later that night, Rachel had a sudden thought. She opened her phone's audio recorder that night. She remembered recording a voice note after the dinner, a habit she had when inspiration struck. She'd whispered, "I want to write a story about this place. It feels magical." She found the file. She pressed play. But instead of her voice, it was silence. And then a faint whisper layered in static. "You weren't supposed to find us." She deleted the file, closed the app, locked her phone, and never spoke of Trattoria Luce again. Sometimes the most beautiful moments are borrowed. From where or from what, we don't know. But be careful, because some doors don't open twice, and some places were never meant to be found at all. Story 5. The man in the mirror wasn't me. Jason wasn't superstitious. Not in the slightest. He was the kind of guy who laughed off ghost stories, scoffed at horror movies, and rolled his eyes at anything labeled haunted. So when he moved into his new apartment, a quiet, third-floor unit in an old pre-war building, he thought nothing of the slight creaks in the floorboards or the way the lights sometimes buzzed for no reason. In fact, he liked the charm, the character. On his first weekend there, he wandered through a nearby flea market looking for something vintage to complete the hallway, something with soul. That's when he saw the mirror. Tall, ornate. The frame was carved mahogany, aged and cracked at the edges. The glass wasn't cracked, but it wasn't perfectly smooth either, a subtle ripple that made your reflection feel softer, older, like it belonged to another time. The vendor grinned as Jason admired it. "Came from an estate clean-out," he said. "1930s, maybe older. You got good taste." Jason bought it on the spot. He hung it right in the hallway, across from the coat hooks. Every morning, he'd pass it on his way to work, usually half awake, coffee in hand, barely registering his own reflection. It became a part of his daily rhythm. Until one Tuesday morning. Jason walked down the hall, mug in hand, adjusting his collar with his free hand. He glanced at the mirror, just a routine look, and stopped, because his reflection didn't move. He blinked, and his reflection stood perfectly still. No blinking, no movement, no coffee cup in hand. Just staring back at him, eyes wide, but with an unnerving calmness. Then, ever so slowly, the reflection's hand, the left hand, began to rise and wave. Jason's coffee cup slipped from his grip and shattered on the floor. He didn't wave. He didn't move. But the reflection smiled, wide, unnatural, before snapping back into sync with him, moving as if nothing had happened. It was as if the delay had never been there. He stood frozen, heart thudding in his ears. Had he imagined it? A trick of light? Fatigue? He backed away, not taking his eyes off the glass until he turned the corner. That night, He covered the mirror with an old bedsheet and duct taped it to the frame. He told himself he was just tired, that the mirror was warped, that he needed more sleep. But the next night, as he lay in bed, the apartment silent, he heard it. Tap. Then again. Tap, tap. Like someone gently knocking from behind the mirror. He turned on every light in the apartment and didn't sleep. In the morning, he checked the hallway. The bedsheet was still there, untouched. But the tape had been peeled back, neatly, like someone had checked from the inside. He tried to get rid of it, called a junk hauler. But the mirror was gone when they arrived, just missing. He searched the apartment from top to bottom. Nothing. Weeks passed. But sometimes, late at night, Jason hears a faint sound. Not quite a voice, not quite a knock, just the barest rustle of breath, as if someone is standing just beyond the hallway wall, waiting, watching. And once, when he took a selfie near the bathroom, the hallway mirror accidentally caught in the background, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. His reflection wasn't holding the phone. Some reflections aren't just copies. Some mirrors don't show you, they show what's waiting to take your place. And once you've seen it, it already knows your face. Story 6. The Looping Jogger in the Park. It was a quiet, crisp Sunday morning, the kind where the world feels freshly pressed, clean and alive under a pale blue sky. Doria slipped on her headphones, tied her running shoes, and headed out for her usual jog around Maplewood Park, a scenic trail that curved gently around a man-made lake just outside the city. She liked the peace, the trees, the ducks, the way the sunlight dappled through the leaves. Her breath and footsteps created a rhythm that always calmed her mind. About 15 minutes into her loop, she passed a man jogging in the opposite direction, tall, athletic build, wearing a red hoodie with a hood up and black running tights. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave a small, polite nod. She nodded back. Nothing unusual, just a fellow early morning jogger. 5 minutes later, she passed him again. Same red hoodie, same nod. Only this time, he passed her in the same direction as before. Opposite direction, opposite stride. Doria blinked. Odd, but maybe he was running tighter loops within the larger trail. People did that sometimes. She dismissed the thought and kept going. On the third time, she passed him at a bend near the bench that overlooked the water. She smiled and gave a little wave. But he didn't react, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge her at all. Just ran past in the exact same form, straight back, steady rhythm, eyes focused forward with a blank expression. It was as if she wasn't even there. A chill crept into her spine. By the fourth time, the illusion of normalcy had vanished. She slowed her pace, eyes darting. Each time he appeared, it was at the same exact spot, as though he had been dropped into the scene by an invisible hand. Same stride, same blank look, same footfalls, unnaturally perfect. By the fifth time, she stopped in her tracks, stood still, watched him jog past. He didn't glance her way, just kept moving. She waited 5 full minutes, counting her breath, standing in the middle of the path. Then, exactly as before, she saw him reappear in the distance. Same red hoodie, same stride, as if time had folded on itself. She crouched low and waited behind a tree, This time, she would follow him, see where he was looping from. As he passed, she trailed behind at a careful distance, her sneakers muffled by the dirt path. But something felt wrong. His form didn't falter. His shoes made no sound against the gravel. He never adjusted his posture, never swayed, never tired. She followed him toward a bend in the trail, one that curved sharply around a grove of old birch trees, a place where the view of the path disappeared for a moment. He jogged toward the trees and vanished behind them. She hurried forward, rounding the curve. But there was no one there. Just silence, not even the echo of footsteps. She searched the area, called out, hesitantly. Nothing. Just the sound of wind rustling the leaves. Then she noticed something chilling. Her own footprints in the dirt. 6 sets of them, all leading in the same direction, all exactly spaced, as if she had run the same loop again and again, though she had only made one complete circle. She looked up, pulse racing. And there, in the distance, barely visible through the trees, was the red-hooded man, jogging toward her again, from the exact same spot as before. She didn't wait to see him pass. Doria turned and ran straight home, not even stopping to catch her breath until she was inside her apartment, with the door locked behind her. She never ran that trail again. But a few days later, scrolling through a local community forum, she saw a post that made her freeze. Anyone else keep seeing the same guy jogging in Maplewood Park in a red hoodie? Doesn't speak, doesn't blink. He's always running the wrong way. Not every stranger is real, and not every loop is natural. Sometimes you aren't jogging through the park. The park is jogging through you. Story 7. The Wrong Parents. It was the last day of summer, and the small-town carnival had rolled into Oak Ridge, like it did every August, a patchwork of flashing lights, cotton candy stands, and clunky rides that creaked like they were older than time itself. For 9-year-old Caleb, it was the most exciting night of the year. He held his parents' hands tight as they strolled through the fairgrounds, stopping for corn dogs, playing ring toss, and watching fire breathers under the glow of carnival bulbs. Laughter filled the air. Everything felt magical. But magic, as Caleb would learn that night, has a dark side too. Somewhere near the carousel, when his father stopped to buy a soda and his mother reached for her purse, Caleb let go. Just for a second. And in the sea of legs, shoes, and swirling lights, he turned and they were gone. Panic struck fast. His heart thudded. His eyes darted between the booths, faces blurring with motion. He tried not to cry, walking quickly past crowds of strangers. Then, a voice. There you are. He turned. A woman, his mom, and beside her, his dad. Same clothes, same voices, same tired smiles. But something was off. He couldn't explain it. Not then. Not exactly. They knelt down. We were so worried, the woman said, reaching for his hand. Let's go home. Relieved but confused, Caleb followed. They walked quickly through the fairgrounds, weaving through people like they were in a hurry, too much of a hurry. His mother didn't ask where he'd been. His father didn't scold him like he normally would have. They didn't feel like his parents. They looked like them, but something beneath the surface. As they walked toward the parking lot, Caleb noticed the car they approached wasn't theirs. It was a dark blue sedan, not the silver minivan his family had come in. He slowed down. "This isn't our car," he said quietly. The man, his supposed dad, opened the back door and motioned for him to get in. And that's when he heard it. The voice that had sounded like his father shifted, subtly, but undeniably. The warmth was gone. It was colder, flatter. Almost like someone pretending to be his dad had run out of lines to say. And the woman, his mother, was still smiling, but her eyes, they weren't blinking. Caleb felt his skin crawl. He took a step back, then another. Then he turned and ran. He darted back into the crowd, weaving past booths and families, ignoring the cries behind him. He didn't stop until he collapsed behind a cotton candy stand, breathless and shaking. A few minutes later, his real mom and dad found him, frantic, calling his name. He sobbed into his mother's chest. But when he tried to explain what happened, the identical pair who'd tried to take him, his mom went pale. She pulled her husband aside, whispering something urgently. Caleb couldn't hear it, but she looked, haunted. Later that night, while putting him to bed, she finally told him what she had seen. "Just before we found you," she said, her voice trembling, "I saw myself in the crowd. Same dress, same hairstyle, same face. She was standing still, watching me. Then she was gone." They never spoke of it again. But Caleb never forgot that night. Never forgot how the people who weren't his parents knew everything, down to his name, his voice, and the way he walked. And sometimes, when he walks through crowds as an adult, he swears he catches glimpses of that same woman, watching him from a distance, smiling, with eyes that still don't blink. Some glitches don't just distort places or time. They copy people. And if you're not paying attention, you might follow the wrong ones home. Story 8. The Numbers in the Sky. It was nearly midnight when Ian decided to go for a walk. He had been staying at his cousin's farmhouse for the weekend, far from the city lights, tucked deep in the Pakistani countryside. No Wi-Fi, no signal, just fields, stars, and the kind of silence that pressed softly against your skin. The night was cool, and the sky stretched wide, a velvet canvas scattered with more stars than he'd ever seen. He walked past the wheat fields, listening to the distant chirp of crickets and the soft rustling of trees. It was peaceful, quiet, one of those rare moments that made you feel small in the best way possible. Until something shifted. He looked up again and paused. At first, he thought they were stars forming a strange pattern. But no constellation looked like that. Floating above the clouds were numbers. Faint, glowing numbers. Like projections, digital but impossibly vast, shimmering just above the treetops. 428.93, 88.199. Not moving, not blinking, just hovering in perfect clarity. He rubbed his eyes, looked again. Still there. He fumbled for his phone, fingers trembling slightly from the cold or maybe something else. He aimed the camera, snapped a photo. But when he checked the screen, nothing. Just stars, clouds, no numbers. He tried again. Video this time. Still nothing. Then, the numbers blinked once and vanished. Just like that. He stood there for a full minute, staring into the now empty sky, The echo of those numbers burned into his brain. Back inside, he couldn't sleep. He scribbled the numbers down on a piece of paper and tucked it into his wallet. The next morning, once he had signal back in town, curiosity got the better of him. He opened his browser and typed the sequence into the search bar. 428.93, 88.199. To his surprise, the browser didn't throw an error. It loaded a page. A completely black screen with a single white sentence centered. "We see you too." No links. No menu. No way to interact. Then, the page blinked, refreshed itself, and was gone. 404 error. He retyped the address. Nothing. He cleared the history, re-entered the IP. No trace of the original page. It was as if the site had been made just for him. He tried telling a friend later that day. They laughed. "Dude, you must have been half asleep. Sounds like a dream." Ian didn't argue. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was a trick of the mind, a weird rural hallucination, stress, or sleep deprivation. He tried to forget. But that night, just after 2 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. No caller ID, no location. Just a simple vibration and the glowing word, "Incoming call." He stared at it, hesitant. Then answered. Silence. "Hello," he whispered. Still silence. Then, from the other end, a voice. No, not one voice, many. Whispers. Low, layered, distorted. Repeating the same sequence, over and over. 42893, 88199. It looped, the voices overlapping, blending into something metallic, mechanical. Like a machine trying to mimic a whisper. He hung up and threw the phone across the room. But the screen stayed lit. The number on it didn't go away. And the whisper continued, even though the call had ended. He removed the battery, powered it off. But that sequence, those numbers, kept surfacing. In browser histories. In autofill text. Once, on a billboard while driving into the city. 428.93, 88.199. He doesn't talk about it anymore. Not because he's afraid people won't believe him, but because he's terrified that someone will. Sometimes the sky sends messages, not from God, not from stars, but from something else. Something watching. And when you look back, it notices. Story 9. The Frozen Crowd. It was Lucy's third day in Tokyo, a solo trip she had planned for years. The city felt alive in a way she'd never experienced before. Giant screens blinked overhead, thousands of footsteps echoed through neon-lit intersections, and the scent of grilled yakitori floated between shops and vending machines. It was just after 4 p.m. when she turned into Harajuku Street, one of the busiest pedestrian zones in the city. Color, movement, noise. Tourists taking selfies. Locals weaving through the crowd. Street performers drumming. A girl in a pink kimono sipping bubble tea. A delivery bike zipped past. Lucy was halfway through crossing the road when it happened. Silence. Stillness. At first, she thought it was part of a performance, a flash mob or artistic stunt. But something was off. Everyone was frozen. Not paused like statues. Frozen in time. Mid-step. Mid-bite. Mid-breath. A man lifting his sushi with chopsticks. suspended in the air. A child mid-run, eyes wide with excitement, not blinking. A woman turning to speak, mouth half open, frozen in soundless motion. Even the pigeons, usually skittish, unpredictable, sat mid-flight, wings locked unnaturally in the air like they'd been pressed against invisible glass. And Lucy? She was the only one moving. Her footsteps echoed in an impossible silence. Her breath felt loud, her heartbeat louder. She whispered, "Hello." No one answered. She took a step, then another. Nothing moved. No reaction. Not even the flicker of eyelids. She touched the arm of a man standing by a vending machine. It was warm, alive, but stiff like a mannequin. Her throat tightened. Then she noticed the sound. A low humming, deep and mechanical, vibrating faintly through the air like radio static underwater. It made her teeth hurt. It made her skin itch. She covered her ears, but the hum wasn't in the air. It was inside her head. Then it all changed. A single flicker, like an old film strip jumping a frame. The world stuttered. A slight blur, a reset, and everything moved again. Chopsticks dropped into bowls. The bike finished its turn. The child laughed and kept running. The crowd roared back to life as if nothing had happened. Except Lucy was standing in the middle of the street, shaking, breathless, screaming. No one noticed. No one looked at her. She backed away, fumbling for her phone. She had instinctively tapped record as soon as the stillness began. With trembling fingers, she stopped the recording and played it back. 47 seconds. Just black static. No video, no audio, just a corrupted file. She checked her health app. Step counter. 47 steps. And that was it. No trace. No proof. She told no one at first. She feared what people would say, that it was jet lag, a panic attack, a dream. But 2 weeks later, back home, she found something strange. She was scrolling through photos from her Tokyo trip, the day it happened, and in one image, taken just before she reached Harajuku, there was another version of her in the crowd. Same coat, same hair, but walking in the opposite direction, looking directly into the camera lens, and smiling. Sometimes time doesn't skip. It watches. It resets. And once you've seen behind the curtain, it sees you too.